The sweet science of boxing never fails to draw emotion, whether from the fans watching the drama unfold or the fighters themselves, who sacrifice so much to reach and compete at the very pinnacle of the sport. Birthdays and holidays spent in the gym, blood, sweat, and tears, all for the opportunity to reach greatness and the riches that come with it. With livelihoods, pride, and championship titles on the line, it's no surprise when the drama spills over and the fighters let it out, all for the cameras to see. Tap the bell button to subscribe if you haven't already, as we relive 5 of the most emotional moments from boxing history, brought to you by Fight Loco. We start with arguably the greatest fighter ever to lace up a pair of gloves, Floyd Mayweather Jr. Alongside his near impenetrable defensive style and brash personality in and out of the ring, Money Mayweather is a fan favorite for achieving a perfect, undefeated professional record of 50 fights and 50 wins, with 27 of those wins coming by way of knockout. But that's not to say that the 5-division world champion never tasted defeat in his long and belt-laden career. During his time in the amateur ranks, Mayweather came up short against opponents on 8 occasions. However, it was his defeat at the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta that drew the most controversy and an emotional post-match outpouring from the future Hall of Famer. Representing the United States in the featherweight category, Mayweather's slick, mobile style and abundance of natural ability saw him progress to the semifinals with relative ease, overcoming respected Cuban fighter Lorenzo Aragon in the quarterfinals. In the semifinals bout, Mayweather faced the tough and more experienced Serafim Todorov of Bulgaria. From the opening bell, the American asserted himself in what was a scrappy back-and-forth affair. The Bulgarian had seemingly no answer for Mayweather's agile footwork and sharp counterpunching, with Todorov landing no serious damage. In contrast, Mayweather was clinical and precise as the bout went to the scorecards, with most in attendance left with little doubt over the victor. Shockingly, all 3 judges scored the contest 10-9 in Todorov's favor, surprising even the referee, who prematurely raised Mayweather's hand as the assumed winner. Moments later, as Mayweather stepped ringside for the post-match interviews, the young fighter's shock and dismay was clear to see.
Do you feel like he got some consideration from the judging? I understand how emotional you are right now, Floyd, with your family.
Next up, we go back to 1980 and the clash between 2 titans of the heavyweight scene, Larry Holmes and the greatest Muhammad Ali. The fight saw Ali come out of retirement aged 38 to challenge Holmes for the WBC World Heavyweight Championship in a contest billed as the Last Hurrah. But a deeper context was at play that made this fight such a poignant and controversial one for both fighters. Holmes and Ali shared a history, having sparred for hundreds of rounds between 1971 and 1975 during the early part of Holmes' career. The 2 warriors even lived together for a period,
I don't have anything bad to say about her, never.
with Holmes looking up to Ali as his idol and mentor. The fight's controversy came from Ali's physical health upon stepping into the ring. Concerns for the 2-time world champion's health were raised at the time promoters were organizing the bout in Las Vegas. In response, the Nevada State Athletic Commission ordered a medical examination of Ali, during which the former champion showed worrying issues with basic hand-eye coordination and speech. Shockingly, Ali was cleared to fight. The greatest was sluggish from the first bell to the last. Gone was his trademark shuffle and bludgeoning power, his ability to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Holmes, the younger and more capable fighter, dominated the bout, but seemed to go easy on the former champ, perhaps out of pity for what he saw in front of him. Mercifully, in the 10th round, Ali's trainer, Angelo Dundee, pulled his man out of the fight, handing Holmes a technical knockout victory. After the fight, the reality of how far Ali had declined and the punishment he'd taken just left Holmes anguished and full of regret.
I feel that he fought one of the baddest heavyweights in the world today, and you cannot take credit from him.
Every fighter must find their own source of motivation if they are to apply the sacrifice, mental fortitude, and hours of punishing training needed to realize their dream of winning belts. When American super middleweight Caleb Plant came up against Jose Uzcategui in January 2019 for the IBF World title, motivation came from the most tragic of sources. 4 years earlier, Plant had suffered an agony no parent should have to face. His daughter, Aliyah, cruelly passed away, aged just 19 months. She'd been born with a rare brain abnormality that caused her to have seizures throughout her young life, sometimes hundreds per day. For Plant, the gym and the ring became a welcome sanctuary from the pain he carried with him since his daughter's death. It was in these theaters that the Tennessee native carved a path to a world title shot against the durable and hard-hitting Venezuelan Uzcategui. Under the lights in Los Angeles, the contest was close and compelling. Plant dominated early, but both fighters landed clean leather on their opponents as the fight swung back and forth. Uzcategui stalked Plant across the ring throughout, but failed to connect with venom on enough occasions. Plant, meanwhile, used his speed and slick movement to put the Venezuelan on the canvas in rounds 2 and 4 as the bout went all the way to the scorecards. 4 years from the cruel passing of his daughter, Plant had turned crushing tragedy into triumph to become the new super middleweight champion of the world. On paper, the 1997 rematch between Britain's Lennox Lewis and America's Oliver McCall promised to be a tantalizing clash between two of sport's biggest names. Lewis was seeking revenge almost 3 years after falling to a shock second-round TKO defeat to McCall in London, England, surrendering his WBC World Heavyweight title in the process. McCall, meanwhile, was aiming to regain his status as the heavyweight champion of the world and stun the sport as the triumphant underdog for the second time. The reality was very different. While the training camp for Lewis was routine, McCall's preparations for the title fight were marred with controversy. The Chicago-born fighter had lived with demons for much of his life, namely drug and alcohol abuse. McCall had also wound up on the wrong side of the law numerous times during his adult life, the result of a difficult upbringing as a tough street kid who fell into the wrong crowd. Maybe it was the pressure of fame and the spotlight that comes with being crowned heavyweight champion of the world, but McCall couldn't escape his past troubles. In the year after losing his world title to Frank Bruno, McCall was arrested multiple times for charges related to substances and violence. He'd also twice spent time in rehab in an attempt to kick his drug habit once and for all. At the start of his training camp for the rematch with Lewis and the now vacant WBC heavyweight title, McCall was still in rehab and suffering from withdrawal. Hardly ideal circumstances for a championship fight, and it showed on the night itself. Lewis started the fight confidently, using a stiff jab to control the distance and assert himself with hard right hands to the head. McCall, meanwhile, lacked the intensity that carried him to victory over Lewis during the first fight. In the third round, McCall landed just 5 punches to Lewis's 34. After the bell rang to close the round, the American began to unravel. As Lewis sat in his corner to recover and receive guidance from his trainers, McCall wandered aimlessly around the ring, like a bored child in a supermarket. His trainers looked on bemused. As round 4 began, McCall's behavior grew even more bizarre. Rather than standing to fight, McCall paced the ring, arms by his side, inviting Lewis to attack. As boos from the crowd rang out, Lewis engaged his opponent, but McCall threw only 2 punches during the entire round. As the bell sounded to bring round 4 to an end, McCall, wandering aimlessly again, was guided back to his corner by the referee. Here, the fighter began to cry. What could have been another night of glory for McCall was instead one of sorrow and anguish. Somehow, McCall was sent out to fight in the 5th, but the bout lasted only 55 seconds longer before referee Mills Lane waved it off, giving Lewis a TKO victory. We end with another dramatic heavyweight matchup, this time between Ukraine's Vitaly Klitschko and the tough Mexican Chris Arreola. The world title fight at Los Angeles' famous Staples Center was always going to be an emotional one for both fighters, with the WBC World Heavyweight title waiting for the victor. Klitschko entered the fight with 2 defeats to his name, both controversial retirements due to injury against the legendary Briton Lennox Lewis and America's Chris Bird. Arreola, meanwhile, was stepping into the ring with an unblemished 27-0 record. The stakes were high for both men, and the crowd knew it. Arreola brought with him the larger following of fans, all hoping to see their man crowned the first Mexican heavyweight champion of the world. The fight itself was absorbing. Klitschko was more controlled and patient than in previous matchups, conserving his energy and electing to box on the outside. Arreola, by contrast, was the more active and energetic fighter, pushing forward to pressure Klitschko in true Mexican style. But for all of Arreola's endeavors and the passion of the crowd, the Mexican's championship dreams were not to be realized. The fight grew more and more one-sided as the rounds went on, with Klitschko landing his bruising right hand repeatedly. At the end of the 10th round, Arreola returned to his stool, cut and swollen after 30 punishing minutes of battle. His trainer-coach, Henry Ramirez, had seen enough and pulled his fighter from the bout to protect him from more serious damage. Arreola would no doubt have fought on another 50 rounds if he could. Such was the size of his heart. As Klitschko celebrated, Arreola paced the ring, tears in his eyes as his dream had slipped away. Thanks for joining us. If you've got an emotional moment from boxing history in mind that we didn't feature, share it with us in the comments below.